Hey, welcome to this edition of Tuesday Talks with Twyla. Today, I want to talk about when we talk about our thoughts and our feelings and how sometimes it can just feel like they're happening to us and we just might not know where these things come from. And so, we talk about I talk about regularly like we are responsible for our thoughts and our thoughts cause our feelings. But sometimes something can happen or we experience something and a thought feeling combination is experienced and we don't know where it came from. Like it either just doesn't really match the current situation or it's at a different level, like almost like an overreaction, or it's more emotional than you would think it should be. And we're like surprised by this, right? Because it's just something that just, it does, like the thoughts sometimes just come to us and we don't always know where they come from or why. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. And we won't go into it in a lot of detail because the short answer is sometimes there can be an experience or something that happens that triggers an emotional response that is from something that happened in our past. And so when we know that, that could be what caused that reaction that you had, and we understand that it wasn't like this thing that just happened that caused this, but it triggered this response that maybe was programmed a long time ago. And it can be things that happened in third grade. It can be things that happened, so long ago that you forgot all about them. And so I just invite you that if that happens to you, where you feel like the thought feeling combination or the emotional reaction to the thing feels somewhat out of the blue, or it's something that does happen regularly, and you're just like, gosh, how come every time this happens, this is what happens to me? Get very curious about this, right? And no judging. We're not judging here. We're not beating ourselves up and thinking, what is the matter with me? There's nothing wrong with you, and nothing has gone wrong. Just know that, our past experiences can leave an imprint. And so there can be, a time where, on the playground, a bunch of the girls went and played and didn't invite you to play with them. And maybe you created a thought pattern around that that meant that you weren't good enough, that you're not, liked. And something triggers that, and you go back into that emotional reaction, and you're like, it doesn't really match today's event, but it's bringing up those feelings. So just know that that could absolutely be what happens because that imprint is there, right? We're human. And so the idea when we talk about our thoughts create our feelings and our thoughts are a choice, and I'll be the first to tell you that it doesn't always feel like a choice, right? Like if we have one of those reactions where something happens and our body remembers and recalls and creates this thought feeling combination as a reaction to this new experience, when we understand what's happening and we can get curious about it, that doesn't mean that we're thought swapping and that's it's a choice to, think that and we shouldn't be thinking that and so we should be changing that because the awareness part, right? Getting curious about it and really exploring what actually happened. So this was the circumstance, and then what happened in my body? What happened in my mind? Like what were the thoughts that I was thinking and where did those come from? And why am I feeling this way? Right? And you start asking those questions and you just kind of drop back into your body. And if you remember, like, oh, I felt like this before. And I remember, like, this is taking me back to third grade on the playground. And then this is where you might be like, that's so absurd, but it's not, right? We're human and our brain remembers things and it leaves that imprint and it leaves that, um, like that mental construct, right? And so that can be regenerated, that can be recreated, it can be, brought back up again, and we can experience it again from that thought pattern, from that imprint from our past. And so just understanding that and just knowing that and having compassion for ourselves through all of it, because nothing has gone wrong. That's how our brain works. That's how our human design is. So when we know that, we can embrace it. We can get curious with compassion and we can understand it. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Like that was very painful for me. And I remember, feeling that way lots of days on the playground after that. I remember that feeling coming back up, in this situation back in high school. And then when I got to college and like, just getting very curious and exploring all of the things that bring that emotional response up, that cause that thought emotion combination to come up again. And then just understanding it and having compassion for it. And then relook at what's happening today. And then just deciding, like, yep, I understand how that would be what my brain provided as a response, but I also can change that thought. Like, that just doesn't apply today. And I don't have to prove myself. I don't, have to think that I'm not good enough. I can actually think that I am good enough or that I am good, right? If you have to just go from a negative thought to a neutral thought, that's okay. But understanding what's happening and finding the thought emotion combination and just, figuring out what they actually are. And that part can be difficult if you're not used to doing this work. And so what I always recommend is just asking, like, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? And just find a quiet place to just do a check-in and just spend some time. Like, even if like the only quiet room in the house is the bathroom and it's just you and your dog, because of course somebody always follows you into the bathroom, whether it's your toddler or your dog, and just find like a space where you can just have some quiet to just explore this, right? And maybe it's not in the moment. Maybe it's like later that night, all the kids are in bed, or it's finally quiet, or you just, it's some time where you can just steal away some quiet minutes and you just get curious about, like, okay, what happened? Like, this was the situation, this was the circumstance, and then, this is what happened to me. Like, I was flooded with this emotion, and then what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was happening in my body? And go back through it and get very curious and be very aware if there's times where like some of that negative thought pattern comes in, or there's even some blocks where it's like, just kind of almost like it prevents you from getting curious and really digging deep. And just notice that and just be like, oh, okay, so my brain just really isn't wanting to go there, but okay, I really want to try to figure this out. Like, where is this coming from? Like, this just doesn't seem to be a fit for what happened. And just allow your brain, your mind, your exploration process to unfold. And don't feel pressured. Don't feel like, oh, I got to figure this out. What's in there, right? Like sometimes you just have to kind of ask the questions like, what am I feeling? Where is that coming from? Like, what is happening? Why am I feeling this way? And just get, and maybe you don't have a lot of answers, and maybe you just have a few and you have lots of, like unanswered questions and just, lots of, confusion and not a lot of clarity. And then you kind of just, okay, that's all I can come up with for now. But what'll happen is your brain will keep working on that, right? You've asked yourself a question, your brain's going to try to find the answer. And so you might be doing the dishes later and be like, oh, I remember now, right? It might just come to you while you're, sitting at a stoplight, while you're doing the dishes, while you're folding the laundry, while, something, is said or done on the TV and you're like, oh yeah, like, and just, or it's a song on the radio or the DJ's voice, whatever. Like something might just be like, oh, and it might jog your memory. So just have compassion and have patience through the process because it might not just, come very quickly and come crashing in. But just understand how all of this stuff works and get very curious about it and have compassion for yourself through all of it. That's always the most important thing. And just know that, like, you're just exploring and getting to know your your brain, your mind better, your body better. And you're just, the more you learn and know, the more you can manage how you react or respond in these situations where maybe you feel like your reaction is out of your control, that your response is just out of the blue. And so when you start understanding all of that and you start getting curious and figuring these things out, you're teaching your brain to, kind of understand the past, and then it doesn't have to apply that to the future. It doesn't have to apply that to this current situation. That you can be like, okay, I remember that, that's how I felt at the time, and that was my reaction, and that was kind of my imprint. But today that doesn't apply to this situation, and so I don't have to experience it that way. I can choose to experience it a different way. And when you understand all of that, that's how you take control of those situations and just work through the process of awareness, exploration, being curious, having compassion, and just working through understanding it all, right? So, with that, I wish you the best of luck on this little journey of learning more, applying the work, and as always, if you get stuck, if you run up against something that, like, opens up something vulnerable and you have a question or you run across a challenge or something doesn't make sense to you and you're trying to apply this, but then something happens, please reach out. Please know that I am always here to answer those questions. And the last thing I want is anyone spinning or being stuck or trying this work and just, running up against some kind of a block. And so just know that I'm always here to ask any questions. So you can reach out at any time. With that, I hope you have the most amazing week as we keep plowing into our summer, right? We've only got a little bit of June left and then we're going to be into July. So with that, have an amazing week and I will catch you next week.